podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you can please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother, Justice Rajee.
Man, so, what will be our last recording of the year 2022, I wanted to just try to have hopefully a mostly positive conversation of just some footnotes, highlights, or moments or whatever have you that were, more on the upside or the top side of the 8, you know what I'm saying, for 2022. And look, we talk about 2023 when you get here. Calendar year being what it may be, you know what I'm saying? I don't want anybody that, it's just a date in the calendar. It don't matter. You know what I mean? That's fine. That's cool.
And there are a variety of them. And I think we've all been at different stages of that. I think there's a lot of ways to tell time, right? And there's certain ways to tell time that are important to different things.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways you tell time that's according to family. There's ways you tell time according to maybe your value system, right? There's ways you tell time according to the, frankly, mainstream environment that you function in,
mm-hmm.
right? And they all can have relevance, and it doesn't necessarily mean one has to take precedence over the other, right? And like with most things in a world of white supremacy, there's always a set of kind of underlying issues that you could look at sometime and be like, okay, wow, we all got moved to this schedule, though there are other people with other schedules, right? So yes, that is always in play. However, also how people throughout time have readjusted it, maybe even some conditions that were not to their liking or to their broad benefit, but they have figured out how to work within it and have it be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I do want to say one thing. I want to say this in all seriousness. I want all y'all that think y'all coming to the gym to stay out the gym. Stay out the gym, man. Do not come with this whole first 2 weeks. I can't get on a machine because you say you got to lose 10 or 15 pounds. All right. We go through this every year. I want y'all to be well. That's why they got yoga videos on television. That's why I got the TRX bands. That's why they got Peloton, man. Stay out of when people been going to the gym all week. Now I'm done. I just had to. I needed to express that. I don't say that on social media anymore because I can come off. But I wanted to say, stay out the gym, man.
It's weird. It's crazy too because I was like, I got been doing some family travel and I'm doing another little traveling next week. Not little, I guess, back to pretty significant travel. And I was like, yeah, when I get back, you know what I'm saying? I'll be able to get back kind of on I know I'll be around like I said, I'll work out to 2.5 weeks and then I'll be gone. But basically the way my schedule is going to work, I'll probably be able to jump in the gym, but I really won't be stable enough to get on a regular schedule. So I'm almost like, yeah, I'm going to miss the whole people, jacked up on goofballs and working out all hard for 2 weeks and then tapering off. So by the time I get back and get on schedule in February, it'll just be the regular people that's normally around that I'm at I still try to if I can, work out on more off hours just because the after work time sometimes be it's too many people in here. And then sometimes that not the early morning, but there's another midday window where it gets a little weird. But if I can time it right, there's times when I can get in and I can access whatever kind of workout I'm doing. I can access all the stuff I want to access relatively low friction. But if I get stuck in too much having to work out like in the evening, 4:30 to 8:30, it's like, damn, man, this dude gonna be on this bench all he just gonna be there the
He's
whole
just sitting there
time.
looking at his phone. He's putting his structure in his phone so he can put it. He can put the pictures of him working out
Yeah,
on Instagram with some like 21 Savage and Drake instrumental or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, get off the machine, get off the bench, man.
yeah.
So, Howard, listen, I want all y'all to be healthy. I want everybody to be well. I want to say that. I just want you to start at home. I want you to start
Well,
with
ease
no.
into it. Don't feel so much pressure. The good thing about if you deciding, to use this as a break point to establish a new healthy habit, you know, you don't have to jump in with both feet. You could just sort of saunter, like slowly walk, roll it in. Like, I'm gonna walk 30 minutes. Uh, I'm gonna you know what I'm saying, I got this stationary bike. I'm every other day, hop on there for 30 minutes and do some you ain't gotta do push-ups. You can just do like a plank up high stand, or just ease into it. Don't feel pressure
No,
to do whatever you've seen on the internet. Like, you don't gotta jump right in
no.
like, I'm gonna learn how to do Olympic lifting. Like, maybe work on some like mobility stuff first.
Yeah, no, but I think, I mean, for real though, I do think that's a part of the challenge of the presence of social media and the framing for what people's workouts to look like. I mean, obviously, there's a benefit where you can see other workouts like, oh, wow, I never thought to do that, right? And you could use it to like your advantage. But when it goes left, it's like you think you have to go as hard as these people because the influencers are telling you that if you don't tear ass for the first 3 weeks, that like, you know, you're not the stuff the champions are made of, right? Where it's like there's there's a reason that there's only a set of high performing athletes in the world, right? Like no matter how much you watch them on TV and you're looking at LeBron spends $1 million on his body at 38 years old. That's why he can drop 40 points in a game. Like, let's not be confused. Like his body is like, one of them the Biden the Biden limousine.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Of bodies. Like,
Yeah, it's like the beast.
you know what I mean? This body is the beast of bodies, man. And you know what I'm saying? Like, so, one, I reinforce stay out the gym, but also ease into it, like my man said.
Yeah, man. Make it culture. You know what I'm saying? It ain't gotta be, like build it in, but that's a good place to start. So I think something though, this I mean may this is something as a positive footnote that I wanted to talk about. It's gonna start with something that I guess that'll be not so positive, but the part about it positive. So, to start at the top of the year, and I think I talked about it on here, my mom had a health event that required care and some support. And I was able, to go home and be there and like help her, get back on the feet, do some stuff at the house, fix some things. And, I just wanted to it was great that, I think I spent a lot of my life prepared or understanding the idea that at some point, my mother would be older and I would need to be able to look out for her. Right. But it's one thing to cognitively know that. It's another thing to have enough of your life and the way your world works organized that you could be supportive. And
Right.
I've talked about that in this place before. Anybody, if it's old news, my bad. But I just it's just something I'm like, okay, good. Like, not that I, had a notebook of like, you watch like TV and movies and people like, I've been journaling my whole life, ready for this moment. Like, it's just a general thing of like, yeah, like I have a job that will allow me to work remotely. I have, my kids are of an age where if I have to be away for 6 weeks, it's, not that they, don't miss me. And I can tell you for sure, the one who's in the house all the time, sure as hell miss me while I was gone. But it's manageable, right? Like fortunate timing on some things. The support of even our overall living situation where shoot, not just the kids miss me. Obviously, the person that me and the kids exist because we're together. That person miss me being around, and also, I live in a multi-generational home. The elders in the house miss me being around, but the reality of having the support, and it is something that highlighted to me, like as we think about society and the way we live, and the degree to which, as I read it, a lot of the conversation, even about lifestyle and structure that people have, is very about their individual needs for themselves in a sense of wellness, and not necessarily their own capacity to be well for them, but also to be well for the other people that they care about, to get what they need if they need it. Right. I think that's a really important facet of, if we're going to project and think about different collective futures, and even something that may have default existed in some of our families because folks was just in proximity or in the same houses. That's like, yeah, we go over there and check on Aunt Mabel all the time because Aunt Mabel lives 2 doors down in the other row house, and we're,
Yeah.
So you just sort of be
Yeah.
looking out, but it wasn't like a plan, but it works, right?
Yeah.
And as our societies and our neighborhoods and the places suppose a lot of us live have changed, especially depending on the size and scale of your family. Where it's like, some folks got a whole lot of different family members that can tap in on looking out for people, and some people ain't. They ain't got that. So it's just something I'm happy. I'm fortunate. I feel good. I feel fortunate. I feel like, brother made good decisions with his life, that I was able to be supportive, to my mom's in a way that obviously, she was super supportive of me, being the person that, brought me in the world and all that, and like fed me food, was my mom. It's been my mom my whole life. So, it's one of my, super duper footnotes. Just that I hope is more fun than it sounds like. I hope they'll be more exciting as this conversation develops. I want everybody getting all mopey.
You definitely started very, very, in much of the Justice way, very like, oh, that's cool. Then got deep over me, like you got deep, and I will say, I mean, one, there is a lot to be said for the flexibility that the new world hath created. Right now, rather, what reasons, to your point, whether someone are doing it very individualistic, whether they've run afoul of kind of worker and cubicle culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's people who just do not do as well because of the constant strains of work and cubicle culture. But the ability to think about that, and also, I mean, I think you make a really good point around how behaviors and multi-generational processes have changed. Whereas, my grandmother did used to go see my older aunts, and I would go with her, and they all lived in Western North Philly. Like, you could go to all their house, all the ones in West, in 10, 12, in 10 to 15 minutes, either direction from my grandmother's house, right? And so you felt a sense of family just on a like, hey, I got to go do this on the way to going doing this. But now, because of a lot of different reasons, neighborhoods and family structures aren't organized in that manner. So to be able to utilize the kind of virtual and digital nature of work, I think becomes that much more important. And it's an outcome that we should use for a good cause, even if that was not the cause of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Especially given that, yeah, there's situations where you can't just call a cousin and ask them to go by somebody's house, right? Like, that's the thing that we all kind of grew up thinking and grew up activating in some capacity. And, given just, migration processes, and then housing being more expensive, the ability maybe for people to always be able to bring, you know, mothers, fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever, just in the multi-generational context, it gets more difficult to bring them to your house because you don't have enough space.
Yeah.
Right. And when space becomes an issue in that regard. So no, that I think Let me see. So I think for me, on a positive note, I think what I learned this year is the power, weight, and worth of the African diaspora. Um, it's something that became, you started to see it, or and I've been engaged in conversation. You and I've had these conversations. You started to see it with, like, when we were growing up, starting in around, 1989, 1990, you started to see the proliferation of reggae, right?
Mhm.
That also obviously dovetails with migration patterns, right? Out of Jamaica in the 80s with IMF, and again, not trying to go there. I'll keep it. I'll keep it up here. But go watch Life in Debt if you have any context for any challenges about what happened in Jamaica and everything around the PLP and the JLP and everything. But so you start to see this in every city in America that had a large black population. You start to see more folks from the Caribbean, but obviously, sometimes we thought people were from Jamaica when they were from other places, but we would just say they was Jamaican.
Right, right.
Um, we just put them all there. So and you would see it. You saw it in the early '90s, kind of saw the, definitely around the year 2000, kind of an explosion. Then saw the explosion of reggaeton. For I think for people's context, it's important to note that reggaeton had a lot to do with the Jamaican migration to Panama.
Mhm.
And when folks went to build the dams, and then just stayed and had multiple iterations of people living there, but they also would speak Spanish. And so you have this, like, reggae beat Spanish speakers, and so you get reggaeton. So you had that kind of explode, and then reggaeton kind of took these multiple forms, right? Kind of EMS. I mean, that wasn't EMS. What's that shit? EDM, and you start seeing all this different kind of stuff. And frankly, you saw reggae kind of recede, and now we see the explosion. And I think that's a fair term, of the idea of Afro beats, globally, but also kind of in America, as also connecting to the migratory patterns of Africans moving to America, and the bouncing back of Africa, Europe, the United States, and so forth. So you see it in the music. But during my travels, particularly to Paris foremost, and then London, I really got to see the power of the diaspora. And I think a part that we don't see in America is what is happening globally with people from the continent, and what that looks like, right? And there, I'm being very specific, not just saying sub-Saharan Africa, but I mean the entire continent,
Mhm.
right? As we talked about with the whole Morocco thing and everything, right? Like, the entire continent, and just the power and the charge of not just music, but food, fashion, culture, that is permeating. And I think for the first time in a long time, I mean, there's a history of this, which we'll speak on at some juncture, but there's really this back and forth, like what's starting in Nigeria, that goes to London, that comes to New York, or comes to Chicago, that then goes back to Toronto, that then goes back over to Paris. And so you're seeing this kind of interplay, very intentional, that I don't think we've seen in a long time. And I think it's really good for the entire diaspora to start to break down the barriers that that have been constructed for us, and that we have constructed for ourselves, in regard to the worth, and heft, and might of the power of what you may call Black people worldwide. So I've really learned and saw that lesson, and I think we will continue to see it. Even as a funny aside, you see Meek over at Afrochella, right?
Mhm.
And he's doing riding bikes, getting his phone stolen. You could have stayed. You could have stayed in America to get your phone stolen. You could have. You know what I'm saying? You could have went to DC or to Chicago for that, but the idea of like the bike riding and him, right, being a dude from Philly, young dude that's like, yo, this has changed my life, right? And I think there's something powerful there where him, Ross being there like last year, where you're seeing these artists come and be really embraced on the continent, and embracing the continent.
Mhm.
I think is a really powerful thing that can do a really good job of breaking down those barriers. So that's one of the really, really good and important things. And I'll end by saying this specifically when it comes to like fashion and stuff like that. Like there are African fashion houses, and we should not assume that when we look to fashion houses that there's only, that the fashion houses are only European,
Mm-hmm.
right? That there are African fashion houses. There are Asian fashion houses. There are, what people would call Arab or, Middle Eastern, depending on your political perspective. There are all these kind of things, and they're really at play globally, maybe not so much in America. And I think once we get outside of the American context, we start to see more of that. So looking forward to that going forward.
All right. Yeah, I mean, there's some too that what you said made me think about maybe our conversations in the coming years is really is exploring things around like that because I think sometimes, especially as Americans, it's hard for us to conceive of a world where America is not one of the poles in a conversation.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that I think it would be good for me to to center the idea of putting myself in more places where I'm with people where one of the poles is not America, even if we happen to be in America at the time. The pole that's maybe one of the strong or positive, negative, was it negative, positive force, strong force weak
Mm-hmm.
in the conversation. That might be moving a stream of thought or a discussion, or even the focus of a discussion, but it's not. It's like America's there on in the sphere observing the dialogue as much, and I think that I think that could be really beneficial for myself, but I think it's also something that I hear. You know what I'm saying in that lesson is that there's a whole other world that's operating with other points of focus.
And we're used to, so I think we're as Black folks in America, we're usually the diaspora that kind of spawns the other diasporas, right? So even if you're like with Cubans, there might be more Cubans here than in Cuba, right? Like if you're with Puerto Ricans, like you know what I mean? So like even if you're talking about people who have a different origin story, there may be so many people here that the kind of synthesis then has its roots here versus like no, the pole truly exists somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And Paris particularly, you realize that the pole of what it means to be like Black French and the multiple identities that people take on. Um, they listen to hip hop, they like it, but the poles of their existence is not America,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they do not get up waiting to think about what LeBron does. They might think about what Mbappe does, right? Like,
Right.
but they don't. Like that's not it. And so when you're somewhere where you're realizing that like the thing that you like to drink isn't the thing that the people drink,
Mm-hmm.
right? The thing that you like to wear isn't the thing that they wear. I mean, sneakers wise, yes, that doesn't change. And there's a power in the American influencing culture around sneakers that I think we underestimate. Actually, like how we overestimate it in some senses, we underestimate the power of when someone sees a shoe being worn in America and what it represents globally. Um, Again, talking about the whole element of soft power, which is I think America has exported culture. Black people in America have exported culture. We've never taken stock of soft power from that exporting of the culture, other than the individual who actually got paid off of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's not about like the power of being Black in America talking about the culture. It's the power of when a artist goes globally and performs, and it's part of that diaspora. But now, again, if Burner Boy comes to America and sells out a show, right? If WizKid comes to America and sells out a show, and they can do they already been doing that globally, but they can do it here now too. And it's not just because of that diaspora, it's also because of the collective of people who are finding this culture. And I think, again, there's the possibility for art, there's a possibility for food, there's a possibility for fashion, there's a possibility for technology, there's a possibility for all these things that again, really see at play and will be important in the global economic and social context going forward, even around, I think, you look at recently President Biden had, a meeting with African heads of state, right, and talked about this. And, this stuff matters globally because when global conflicts take place, now increasingly, you know, African countries are going to matter in this. And one thing I'll leave it with is on the fashion thing. It's important to note that Chanel this year actually did one of their fashion showings in Senegal, like literally nodding to the fact that this global fashion house with its origin in France is being influenced so much by the African continent to do something in Senegal. So you're just starting to see what that looks like and what that means in the global context. So,
all right. So something else that was I guess a note for me this year was and I think it's in the same vein, but sort of like a value of kind of intensifying engagement when it comes to like your relationships or the things that you're doing. I mean, I'm sure I got to check my human development chart, because some of it definitely is an age thing, but like it's been more valuable and more impactful to me this year. Um, making sure I touch base with the people who I think really matter to me, right? And seeing them on a community level, making myself available and even prioritizing. I think I've said in some of other conversations. I think the pandemic experience of being separated is going to lead to, at least in some circles, an intensity on getting together with the people that you want to see. I mean, we have I think a societal trope, at least here in the United States, of like, people. I'm not one of these people, but I know a lot of y'all other people live this way, where like you say stuff like, "Yeah, we should get together," but you don't really mean it.
absolutely right. Absolutely.
Like I rarely, I don't know if I ever say I don't say to nobody that we should get together if I don't really want to get together with you. And be like, I say, it's good to see you. You know what I'm saying? like now you might say it to me, and I'd be like, well, I mean, if you really want to get with me and I give you my information and you hit me up, we'll do it. But if I don't really want to get together with you, I ain't gonna, it ain't gonna happen, dog. Because I ain't really trying to get together with you unless you invite me. But I think that there's I think that for me, I've had like conversations and sit downs with people and catch ups with folks where you really get you get a clear understanding that, to whatever degree you are acquainted, people really care about you. They do want to see, what you're doing, or they want to know where you're at, that sort of thing, but that it has a lasting and meaningful impact on other people, the person that you are in their life, and even the person you are in your own life, and that you need to, keep. I don't know. I just feel like something that there's been like I've had just a lot of really good one-on-ones with some folks this year that I hadn't had. You know what I mean? Some moments. Some sitting down having a coffees, and that made the year. You know what I mean? To be quite frank, you know what I mean? That raised days may have been a little bit on the bummy side, that like like, oh man, all right, life's cool, like I'm gonna go do this, go see this person. And I think it's just something I want to carry And I guess I would say on a broader community level, just in like some parent organizing and community work we've done here, like we spent the last 2 summers, trying to create some space for folks to get together. And we've seen how important it is just to make space for people to like be with each other, especially Black folks. Um, and I think that I think we're coming out of an age. I think it's been an age of adjustment from the time that we grew up, where we still had sort of the remnant structures of the pre-segregation society, where we had a higher level of proximity and placement, where you still just sort of could happenstance into being.
Yeah.
And I think we've moved through a whole generation, at least from the way they talk about it on the interwebs, that has not experienced that proximity, and either the intentional aspects of it or the coincidental aspects of it, and it shows sometimes, in positive and negative ways, that sometimes folks I think are missing that experience, and then sometimes folks are not. They're craving that experience, but maybe not sure how to make it happen. And I just think, the key
Yeah.
note is like, yo, just find a way to get together. Like, just
Well, that's a good point too. I mean, I think to the first part of your conversation, first thing you added on about is, yeah, like when stuff would just happen, right? And the proximity itself just made you do things, right? And so now we're like in a place where the patterns are as such as where like, no, you have to be intentional. And I think sometimes it's a challenge for our generation to be as intentional,
Mhm.
or to put a premium on intention when you've been used to these bump ins and these kind of electrons hitting each other and creating sparking energy, and you think it's like that's the nature of how it should be, like that's the natural thing, versus you may have been fortunate to be in a time where people were aggregated in this kind of way to create these things, where a new generation of people has to be intentional in another way. And the way they're intentional might seem a bit off. It does to me sometimes. So I want to speak for myself. But I now understand. I'm coming to understand why it has to be like that. Like why, but like why the idea of Black Twitter really is a thing,
Mhm, mhm.
right? Like where you get the old Grinches like me that's like, yo, dog, why y'all y'all don't know each other. Right? Because when you're coming from the aggregate, right? You're coming from the aggregate. Y'all don't know each other. You don't know the
Right,
people. You're not paying. You don't know the people.
right.
Whereas, like, no, in this world, these are ways that relationships are being built,
Yeah.
right? And you have a possibility for global connections if done in a way, to your point, that is actually thoughtful and careful and nuanced. I mean, in this idea of like, okay, no, Ghana, and Accra, they're doing Afrochella, right? Again, being very intentional about this idea of bringing people from all across the globe to this kind of conversation.
Mhm.
That happens because of this new kind of networking and reorganization of a sense of self and identity. Because so it's not just like, all right, well, New York got Harlem Week, Philly got O'Doon Day, DC got Georgia Avenue Day. You know what I mean? Detroit got this festival, LA got this festival, right? Like where I think that's how we used to be, right? Like in any individual place had its own sense of stuff. So your sense of identity was so grounded in place,
Mhm.
right? Where I think that this evolution of identity, and especially in places where Black people are not either a majority or a plurality,
Mhm, mhm.
then it becomes triply or doubly. You know what I mean? It becomes really more important to be
Yeah.
intentional.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
um, so last one I'll share is I think this year I realized that hip hop is okay. um, like again, there's another part of this context of golden era, golden age kind of, where I think people are extending this space of what they call the golden era, where we might have argued it stopped at like 91, 92. Now people are extending it in ways. Sometimes I think those ages don't connect, but for the sake of it, I get it. Because I don't really connect if the music that was done in 88, music that was done in 94, 95, they're not connected. I don't think, right? I mean, they have a clear through line.
Yeah, but I think
but they were not being done in the same age. Yeah. But anyway, like, and so I think for a long time, artists and those of us who may be cultural communicators, have all just thought about how bad the art is, or how bad the music is. And I think it's really difficult. 2023 proved it's really difficult to say that there's not hip hop you can listen to, no matter what your take on it is, right? Like, if you're old man or old woman, listen to Pusha T or Freddie Gibbs, right? If you want other stuff, listen. If you're young and young artists and great artists, listen to Corday. Like, if you want this, follow this over here. Like, there's no shortage of actual quality hip hop music from all areas, from all backgrounds, and frankly of all ages being released. It's no longer in a small box for only certain edification and like kind of certain consumption, which I think sometimes our bigger challenge is. I also think about it with sneaker culture as an aside. But like, hip hop is okay, right? Like, hip hop is so broad now, there's going to be entirely harmful, goofy, dumb ways that it exists and ways that it's going well. And so we have to give, I kind of have thought about it in that context. And I also do think we're at a place where older artists, when Melly Melon were 45, we didn't want to hear them rap. Where if Pusha T is 45, we do. If Nas is almost 50, right? And we're still actively listening to their music. So I think there's more of a space, more of a band where those artists can perform and be seen within the canon, and not just like when we was growing up at the Dell, at the War Memorial in Trenton, how you had like, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes and the Stylistics and the Shy Lights and Nancy Wilson come. You know what I mean? Like, now if you want to do that, there's these, there's these what do you call them? Cruises, the hip hop cruises and all that kind of stuff. So there's that kind of stuff if you want that. But there's also just a spot date from a 50-year-old rapper who's arguably producing their best work. Nas or Pusha T are both arguably producing their best work close to 50 years old.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Yeah, I just would like to add on with that one too. That like, I think the and then maybe this will actually be my closing footnote is what I want to say for the year too, is that like, I realize how much more, like, how many things there are out there for me to be like curious about. Yeah, it's like, I can't think of the last time I really like read a a write up about some music in consecutive weeks. Like, like where, the time like, even consecutive months. So like, oh, it was the source and the vibe and this, and you would leave, even if you didn't read every article, you page through every month and kind of had a I don't know last time I did that related to music, you know what I'm saying? Or learned more about this artist, like, just music as one paradigm for that. But like, there's so much other reading out there to be done on various topics that like this year, as much as I've had to read, either for my own, for my professional work, for my personal edification, and even I was going to do an exercise that my brother-in-law does, where he writes down all the books that he read in a given year. You know what I'm saying? To like get a sense of like, what did I read this year? And I think even with the times that I've had to kind of spend on the move, or away, since as I mentioned earlier, taking care of my mom's, is that it did actually afford me time to like read, because of time that I would have been chit chatting, with my kids or my partner or whatever. I was like, I'm here by myself. all right, well, I guess I'm gonna read something. You know what I'm saying? I don't really have no video game systems, and that, there's all the various ways one could distract themselves or use your time. I find myself reading, and yeah, I like reading. There's a lot to learn, and I think, but on that particularly around hip hop, it's like at some point, it's just like, what? There's a lot of good music. Like if you don't like something, you just don't have to like it. You can just move on, like to something else. There's so much. There's so much, and we have so much access to so much music. I think there is one article I read about like the way access to old music is impacting listening to new music because people can listen to a lot of old music in a way that you was not as easy in the past. So like if you just wanted to spend 3 weeks listening to like 50s lounge music, you could totally do that. You know what I'm saying? And not listen to whoever's new record came out. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Whoever's producing a similar music today,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that that's also a place that kind of wraps in some of the other dialogue. That's a place where I learned, and I learned it kind of in 20, kind of during the pandemic, but it's continued, specifically like the British take on jazz. Because their jazz has obviously influences from the traditional forms of jazz, but it also has influences like drum and bass, right? They also have these other forms of influence that like some American music doesn't have. Doesn't mean all, because like Michaela McCraven and all of them are also very similar, but like, you know, that is very true. And so yeah, if you just kind of want to listen to Roy Ayers, right? You never have to listen to anyone doing something like Roy Ayers now.
Right. You just listen to all of the Roy Ayers.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can, yeah, you can. He got this 77, tracks.
Which in some sense is like the height of capitalism. Like in some senses, as much as we like to throw our broadsides against it. Like it's the height of being able to be like, I can listen for literally tenths of a pennies on a dollar because that's what they get.
Yeah,
I can listen to everything I want to listen to. Now there's a genius, there's a beauty to it, and at the same time, to your point, I think curation and artists and people like us curating playlists and curating things become more important because you know we can share new things. Like we'll share, and then you'll share it in the notes. But being able to share, like, hey, give this a listen. You may not have taken time to do it. We may have taken some time to do it. And since you listen to us, we can give you something back. Here's 5 songs you should check out.
right. Keep it so. Or yeah, man. So with that, I think we're close to where we could send off. But I did want to make space, and I think it's important. In this space, and it's someone that is important enough to us that those who would listen to these conversations and find them valuable, I think would understand, or hopefully would. We on a sad note lost a dear friend, good brother, almost 30 years of brotherhood and friendship, companionship. You know what I'm saying? Whatever have you, however you want to frame it, passed in recent week, and you know, as many things as we make public in our society, I'm still ambivalent about what stuff is appropriate or having to make some sort of like, yeah, I got to go on social media, I got to go on my Facebook and tell everybody about how close I was, to this person. I'm still, I don't know. My base response is there's a place for, almost there's a priority to those dialogues. You know what I'm saying? And until I do one step, which would be having the opportunity to say those words either to those who shared that relationship, i.e., you, and our other folks that we call friends and call brothers, and what have ancestors do. When just us men, you know what I'm saying? We mix of genders, being being and operating within the community of care. Um, it, but said I'd say, it's it's something to being our age and having the cognitive and the statistical data that would tell you that it's reasonable that some of us, some of your peers, or someone may pass, due to health related reasons or whatever, or even other things like car accidents and the general reality. But when you're dealing with it, when it happens, it's still shocking. It still weighs heavy on you, and I just want to make space to say, first of all, like thank you to um to my man's his name's Chris. I'm gonna say it's honorable. First name I ain't gonna I don't other stuff's private. Um, good, great friend. Curious friend, great, great person to spend time with, who meant a lot to both of us and all of us, sort of the way a lot of our development and ability to kind of grow into who we grown into was a shared experience, and a giving back and a supporting each other, sometimes in the material ways and supporting each other sometimes in the other ways that folks need to be supported. And I think it's the cats, maybe actually should might make a category for future conversations, the concept of like good people, what I'm saying? Like, when somebody's good people, and I think some of us that might be listening know what that means when you say, "Oh, that's good people." Um, my man Chris is good people, and I'm gonna miss him in that sense. But I always have the memories with me, and yeah, I want to make sure anybody that didn't know him or those that did know him, that most as far as his son, what I'm saying, the folks he may have been in relationships with, that that's my guy. Thank you. So. Yeah, I passed you.
Yeah, man. I think this is a place where I think a lot of the dialogues that have run through Asher Oldhead and the Good Brothers, and trying to probe a little deeper into the things, right? And I think
I lost you. Got sound wise.
um, the things you get to is mourning,
Mm.
and Black men, particularly. Obviously, I'm not discounting Black women. We're just two Black men talking right now.
Yeah.
So, you know, um, you know, how do we mourn, right? How do you mourn publicly? How do you mourn privately? How do you deal with the anxiety around mortality? And I think we've seen how we frame mourning when people are maybe, they're no longer here through maybe intercommunity violence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and we deal with the health issues and some of those things, and we just have, we either through the conditioning or through just the nature of how fast and furious it comes, have to like charge it to the game,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where we know it's never charged to the game, because the game you're charging it to lives inside of you, right? The place you're putting it, you're not putting it outside yourself. You're putting it in yourself. You're just stuffing it, right? And so how we mourn, and then how do we mourn people who were good people who, it doesn't matter how you return to the essence, but just people who were good people, and maybe it was sudden, and processing how to do that. And even this conversation is a part of it. And I think we're all trying to, those of us who were close to him, and had a long-term relationship, uh, are trying to process that. Um, and I think it's a process over time,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it's a process over time to deal with it. I already miss him. I will continue to miss him, and it just reinforces, like, never leave it all on the floor, to use an athletic
Mm-hmm.
Termed athletic allegory. Like, leave it on the floor, man. Tell people how you feel about them
Yeah.
as much as you can.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Never let it be said that, like, you think someone didn't know. Because if you think someone didn't know how you felt about them, that's on you. And that's not in a negative way. It's not making, but it's on you that you didn't let that person know what you thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just on a comedic.
Um,
Oh.
left he left the physical plane knowing that he was loved and cared for,
Mm-hmm.
and his name will continue to, not only obviously through his son, um, but also through all the people he touched and impacted, and all the communities and all the work. Just somebody who gave back, somebody who helped so many move to new places professionally,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, there's a big loss in this city and in this town, in this region, because he's, again, not with us in the physical, but we also do remember that where people really live is in your mind, because if
Mm-hmm.
you don't see him, you don't see him. With the spatial infinity, like, you
Right.
don't really around. Like, as much as we like to think we know people are around, when you're not with them, guess what? You don't really know they're
Right.
around, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, but they live in your mind,
Yeah.
and he'll continue to live in the mind and in the quote unquote hearts of many. So, but thanks for making the space, and willfully people who are listening take from it and think about how they mourn, how we mourn as community, and then how do we properly make sure that people's names and legacies live on.
Yeah. 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 Because I think I'll say just to in closing, it's like, you know, it's you don't know how much uh people mean to you sometimes, and it can be and not even just that, but almost your trust that you're gonna get to follow up on those conversations or whatever. Sometimes you just gotta as we have a joke, and I'm not gonna say this other person's information, but I'll say this: you can show and prove that I was thinking about you because I called. It's the one
Right, yeah.
that we both hold dear.
Actual
That
fact.
gives us the business. And me and your good brother Knowledge Divide have an ongoing you know, turf war where we gotta hit that person first so they don't hit us. They can say that. But I understand the sentiment and the meaning, and it's really important. You know what I mean? Even as much as a society, I think we're going to reckon with it over the next year and a half. Unrelated, you know what I mean, to our good brother's passing. Just the way folks are dealing with the grief of what we've experienced with the pandemic and other things. I mean, my wish, my will would be to see just a higher level of sacred, appreciation, what I mean, for the life of those that matter to us in our lives, and that we, just make it a pride. It's all right to be like, yo, we should just get together because so we don't be sad and say we ain't talked. Like, if something happened to one of us, let's get together so we know we got together. You know what I'm saying? And we could tell other people. We ain't got to tell people what's happening. Just a footnote. You ain't got to tell everybody every time you hang out with someone. Okay. Don't let the internet fool you. You can just keep it to yourself, but keep it to yourself in, like, in your circle. You know what I'm saying? In that circle, it's all good. So in any event, I tried to keep it as exciting and positive as we could. I mean, I don't know if we achieved it, but I mean, I love y'all and I love you. Oh, it's on mute, guy.
Oh shit! I was talking. I was talking. Shit! I was talking to my goddamn self. Um, hearing myself talk, hearing you talk. I started hearing myself talk. No, I think we covered some things, and I think also in the sense of gratitude, want to say thanks to everyone who listens. Thanks to people who share this with people they know. Thanks to people who kind of take some of the things that we may think about and process it. Hey, you may agree, you may disagree, but that we remain curious, and I think we'll have a lot to be able to bring to the table to continue to elevate those kind of things going forward. But I just want to say thank you and being practicing gratitude, and also to you, Just, for being steadfast in regard to, the original origin story of the idea of asking those who came before us about wisdom, especially when in many ways the ageism thing in the Black community gets real twisted. Um, you know, old folks want to be too young. Young folks don't know the benefit of being old because sometimes there's nobody but so old in their families.
Mm.
So we have a lot there. But yeah, but I think we ended a good place. Everybody, be careful. If you're drinking and thinking, do more thinking than drinking. You know what I'm saying? And most importantly, I want to say this again. Most importantly, for everyone, get off the machines if you come in there on January 2nd acting like you're about to lose 10, 20 pounds. Because I really want to use trying to use the leg press, man. So
Right.
just want to let you.
And I'm a close. And if you don't really, if you don't know how to use the squat rack, just leave it alone. It's okay.
Yeah.
Leave it alone.
Yeah.
Take a training
That's a
lesson
big one.
and
That's a
then go
big one.
back to the squat rack. It's
No,
all good.
that's a big one. That's a big one. No, you're right. You're right. That's a huge one.
Yeah, and I would share a piece of wisdom. Hopefully, I think the source of this particular note will appreciate it. Don't get so far out there that you forget your name. You know what I'm saying? So, have a good night. Be safe.
My man.
Peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. Good Brothers is a part of the Ash Your Oldhead podcast, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen. You can support the podcast by listening, rating, and subscribing wherever you listen, and also sharing. You can further support the podcast by becoming a patron. You can search Justice Rajee on Patreon and subscribe and contribute a little bit every month to offset the costs to keep recording. Further, last way you can support the podcast is you can head to the Ash Your Oldhead Etsy shop. I actually have 2 new sweatshirt designs up there. You can purchase a sweatshirt or whatever is currently available, and all proceeds go towards the podcast. So please be safe. Please be safe tonight if I get this out on time. Please be safe in general. Big time for those you love, and make time for yourself. Appreciate you in 2022 and more to come in 2023. So with that, I'll say peace.